progress bar down there. Remember, we're hot.
All right, and you're live. Okay, Andrew, you can begin.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us. This is Andrew Morrill, President of the Arizona Education Association, and this is a telephone town hall with Arizona's next Superintendent of Public Instruction, David Garcia. We're very excited to have you joining us this evening, and we're going to begin in just a minute. Right now, calls are going out across the state, and you're going to have an opportunity to speak live with David Garcia and ask him questions about his vision for schools, learn about the upcoming election and what you can do to help. Again, I'm Andrew Morrill, President of the AEA. You're also going to be able to be connected directly with David by pressing 0 on your keypad to ask a question. So when you're ready to ask a question after we've begun, you'll hit 0. I'm going to pause and go through this introduction one more time as people are calling in and joining us, and we'll begin in just a minute. Thank you for being with us this evening. Good evening once again. You're with the Arizona Education Association and a telephone town hall this evening with a special guest, Arizona's next Superintendent of Public Instruction, David Garcia. We're going to be speaking live with David tonight. He's here with us. You're going to have a chance to ask him questions and hear about his vision for Arizona's public schools, the importance of the election, and what you can do to help and get involved. I'm Andrew Morrill, President of the Arizona Education Association, and I'll be your moderator tonight. To ask a question, all you have to do is press 0 on your telephone keypad, and you'll be connected directly with one of our volunteer operators. So this is very interactive. We hope you will do that. There'll be some wait time, but if you stay patient, you'll get a chance to speak directly with David Garcia. I want to tell you that I'm very proud as President of the Arizona Education Association to be able to tell you that it's the members of the AEA that actually recommended David Garcia. And they did that because what resonates with them is that David really is an educator. A lot of educators across the state are ready for somebody who really understands education to lead our public education system. And they have that in David Garcia, and that's why the members of the AEA directed our fund council toward a unanimous recommendation of David Garcia for Superintendent of Public Instruction. And that's why we're so happy to have him on the phone tonight. Remember to press 0 when you ask a question. David, I want to welcome you. You've got a great story. You're an Arizona native. You are an educator in Arizona, and you came through Arizona's public schools, and maybe your story about how you did that and when you actually caught on to education sounds like a lot of other stories. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and then why you're running for Superintendent of Public Instruction?
Sure, Andrew. First off, thank you very much. I want you to know, as well as everyone out there listening, how happy and proud I am to be with you all here tonight. My education story is important because I think everybody's education story is important. It shapes who we are. It shapes where we're going. And I think that the listeners should understand that when they hear about my commitment to public education, it comes from the fact that I'm a product of public education. I'm a product of Arizona's public schools. I am like a lot of our students here in Arizona. I'm the first in my family to graduate from college. And that's important, something I'm very proud of. And I know that we have many students out there who are trying to blaze new trails for their families, and I was one of those. Now, my dad was a commercial painter. My mom worked in an electronics factory. They wanted me to graduate from high school, but they had no idea how to counsel me to get there. So I graduated because that's what they asked me to do, but I soon realized I wasn't ready for anything past high school. My procrastination got me a one-way ticket to Fort Benning, Georgia, as a 17-year-old to join the infantry, where I turned my life around. I took high school over again, did much better there, and came back to Arizona, graduated from Arizona State, graduated much better than I did as a high school student, and then had the real privilege of getting a doctorate in education policy and research from the University of Chicago. I have also worked at the state legislature here in Arizona in a position that involved both Democrats and Republicans, and I am the former associate superintendent for the state of Arizona, which basically means I am ready to get started day one. I've led the agency. And for the last 9 years, I have been an education professor teaching teachers throughout the state who are now education leaders, proud education leaders throughout the state. I'm happy about that. Why am I running? Very quickly, I'm a public school parent. I have 2 daughters in public schools, and truth is, I want them to be in a great public school, but it's not enough if I just worry about my 2. The reality is the state will get better when folks care about the education of other people's children as much as they care about the education of their own, and it's that commitment that leads me to running for this position.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We're going to get right to questions. While we take some of these questions, David, I think you've got a question for
I do, and this is very exciting. This is a lot going on here. I got to tell you all, these questions are coming right to me. So, what I'd really want to know, given I have this opportunity here tonight, is help me out. Let me know, what is the most important thing you want me to focus on once I'm elected superintendent of public instruction? And you can let me know by pressing 1 on your keypad if you think it is focused on measuring what matters when it comes to student success, or pressing 2 if the issue is ensuring fair teacher evaluation systems, or pressing 3 if your issue is push the legislature to restore funding to our schools. Again, one more time, press 1 if it's focused on measuring what matters when it comes to student success. Press 2 if your issue is ensure fair teacher evaluation systems, or press 3 if your issue is push the legislature to restore funding to our public schools.
Thanks, David, and we hope our listeners will go ahead and answer that. And then in the meantime, remember to press 0 to ask a question. We've got some folks with questions, and I think the first person we're going to hear from is James. James is out in Fountain Hills.
Yes. First of all, good luck in running, and I've got a quick question for you.
Go right ahead, James.
Okay. The state owes, I'm a public educator, and the state owes us a lot of money. It's tough being a teacher. If you saw Ron Hoon with the governor's debate on Sunday, I mean, we are getting paid next to nothing. What would you do about teachers' pay?
Well,
big question.
It's a huge question. And let me tell you what we're going to focus on here. We need to treat our teachers as professionals. And it's very important to me because we cannot expect our best and brightest to come into teaching. We can't expect folks to have a career, raise a family in teaching if we do not treat our teachers as professionals. And James, to me, that includes 2 basic components. Number 1, we need to pay teachers commensurate to what they contribute to Arizona from an economic and civic perspective. Arizona public school teachers make our schools and make our state a better place, and we need to make sure they're compensated for that. Second, we need to let them teach. That means allowing for more flexibility and getting away from focusing on standardized test scores so that our teachers can teach the subject matters that they care about most and can be creative and passionate and innovative in their classroom.
You're not satisfied with where teacher salaries are right now?
I'm not satisfied where teacher salaries are right now. And by the way, I hear that in many, many places. The question is, how do we take the next step forward? James, we're going to focus on a few big problems here in Arizona. This is how I'm going to organize input and action groups for part of at the Department of Education, and one of them will be around teacher issues, particularly teacher pay. I look forward to having you and your members as part of that discussion.
Excellent. James, thank you for that question. And we're going from one big issue, which is teacher compensation, to another one, David, and we're not taking it easy on you. Let's go to, there are many people calling in right now wanting to know your position on Common Core. Why don't we hear from Monica in Chandler?
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to ask you my question, which is sort of a two-parter. And I'm in the Paradise Valley area. I'm a 30-year veteran special education teacher, and I teach the population that is less than 1% of the public school education, students with intellectual disabilities. I find that the Common Core standards is a one-size-fits-all that doesn't fit all, and it takes away from the individualization of an IEP, individual education plan. In addition, the alternate assessments that are so time-consuming when these students are not in competition for placement to colleges, most go into the workforce, it's still a requirement that just takes so much time out of the educator, me, and results in a disconnect because I'm spending so much time assessing students on these state-required tests.
All right, thank you
I
for
hope
the
this
question.
makes sense.
It does. And David, as with anything else, Common Core, we renamed the standards. A lot of the problems persist. They're Arizona's college and career-ready standards. Educators are worried about the assessments going with them, the needs in the classroom. What's your take?
I'm excited to address this with an educated audience. This is great for me because you all know that the conspiracy theories around Common Core are not true, and they do serve as a disservice to our public. You all know that standards our academic standards are they've been around for 20 years. Every iteration has been better than the one before. I stand with us with our standards. Look, we've got implementation issues to take care of. That's got to happen. Every state is in the exact same situation. The question is not whether we take a step backwards and throw out the standards, but how do we implement them in a way that is in the best interest of Arizona teachers, Arizona students, Arizona families. And the reason is because for many of our students, we do need to answer the question for our state, how do you compare and benchmark to other states and other areas nationally? But here's where I draw a very important line. We will do quite a bit of work on the testing and accountability side. See, right now, what I think is problematic is the standardized test is nearly the only way we're measuring school performance. Your letter grades, folks, you know, 96% of that letter grade is based off a standardized test score. We're going to change that. We're still going to have standards. We're still going to have assessments. They're just not going to count as 96% of how you evaluate schools and educators. In its place, we're going to put in some measures that matter, that get students ready for life after high school. And here are some examples, and I look forward to more, by the way, once we get started in this conversation. But things like AP credits, getting a career and technical education certificate, proficiency in computer language, maybe proficiency in multiple world languages. Those are exciting outcomes that are going to make Arizona a better place, are going to be part of a public narrative to invite and encourage our public to reinvest in public schools. And what's exciting to me is that it gets us away from a one-size-fits-all standardized approach to education.
A big part of your campaign, David, has been measure what matters. But Arizona's had standards, high standards for students, for 20 years. So state standards are not new, but educators are concerned with all those classroom needs, and they don't feel that anybody's really listening to them. You're ready to listen to teachers about how we're going to actually make students successful with standards. Yeah,
not only am I ready to listen to teachers, I'm not sure how we can take any meaningful step without our teachers. I have seen folks run for this office. It's been a very good stepping stone for politicians. It's not my aspiration. My goal is very simple. I want to leave our public schools stronger than when I found them. And if you're going to hold that as a goal in terms of what you'd like to do, I don't see how you get that meaningfully done without encouraging and incorporating the input of our teachers.
Folks, remember, please, this is an interactive event. David is here because he wants to talk to you. He wants to hear from you. So hit 0, push 0, and you'll go right to one of our screeners, and you can then be in line to talk to David. David, we've got Manny, who's referring to an event where you were over in Mammoth. So obviously you've been all around the state. And he'd like to talk about the money available to students in continuing education beyond high school. Manny, are you there?
Yes, I am. How are you this evening?
Doing well. Thanks for being on with us. This is David right here.
Dr. Garcia, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well, Manny.
I want to thank you, first of all, for coming down and visiting with us here in Mammoth. One of the a question that I have for you is when you were speaking to us, you were telling us that there is money available for year 13 and 14 for students to continue their education, which could possibly be going to a junior college, but they're still going to the high school. Can you talk to us more about that?
Sure. Manny, first off, thank you very much for joining me in Mammoth. I was very excited to be out there, and it's an important part of our great state is to make sure you're covering all corners. So it's beautiful out there. Thank you. What I was mentioning there is, according to state law, that public funding continues with students until they turn 22, and that there is some creativity that we could think about there. And in particular, I was talking about what is going on in the state of Tennessee. The state of Tennessee, as part of their K-12 system, is incorporating 2 years of post-secondary education in their K-12 education promise, basically. And it's exciting. It's exciting because it recognizes that students are going to have to move on to some post-secondary education. It may not be college, could be career training, but that we need to continue to encourage, promote, and support our students to learn. And I think that those types of ideas, like what's going on in Tennessee, are what we're going to compete against in Arizona if we're going to be serious about people investing in our state, but also are the kind of creative ideas that I'm looking forward to taking on.
Thanks very much for the call. David, you asked a question to our listeners about what the most important thing was that they wanted you to focus on, and the results are pretty clear.
Yeah, I can see that.
We've got 11% of the folks that called in saying measure what matters. That's a big part of what you've been saying. There are about 9% that are really concerned about where we're headed with evaluation, but get this, 80% need the legislature and need your role in pushing the legislature to restore funding to our schools. And there's a caller we're going to talk to about that. But first, Flora in Phoenix would like to talk to you about ELL learners, or English language learners. You've got a personal connection with that. I know that's an important part of your campaign. Flora, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening, Dr. Garcia.
Good evening.
Yes, I myself was an ELL learner in Texas, and I went through the bilingual program, and as a result, I'm fluent in both English and Spanish, and I even picked up French along the way. I'm currently pursuing a doctoral degree in English as a second language, and in my research, time and time again, I find that the strategies utilized in Arizona aren't best practices when it comes to addressing the needs of ELL learners. It's a result of SB 1070 and other political strategies, and I just wanted to know what your stance is on.
Flora, first off, congratulations. You are a model, in my opinion, of what we can do in Arizona with regard to language acquisition. I believe in this state we've had a very impoverished view of language acquisition, largely because, just to tell you just in broad strokes, my opinion is that what we've done in Arizona is try to replace one language with another. And it misses a tremendous opportunity for our students to leave our schools academically proficient in more than one world language. If Arizona wants to get serious about getting students ready to compete in an international marketplace, I can't think of a better start than having as many students as possible graduate speaking more than one world language. It's an important part of my platform. You should know, by the way, that this idea of getting support within education, beyond education, including the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which is an organization that doesn't always and has very rarely endorsed statewide Democrats. But when I got in front of that group, they asked me this question, and I said to them, how many of you speak Spanish? Nobody raised their hand. And I said, well, my daughter speaks Spanish. She's 7, and she can do something that nobody here in the room can do. She can speak to our biggest trade partner, Mexico, in their native language. Why aren't we taking advantage of our language diversity in Arizona as a natural human resource? And it's something that I have talked a lot about and look forward to getting to work to so that we can start seeing our language diversity as the asset that it is.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the call. We've got a caller from Phoenix Elementary wants to go back to the funding. We, after all, saw that our participants tonight overwhelmingly concerned with what's happened to funding cuts. And we've got Nurit, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. You're in Phoenix L. Are you on?
Yeah, I'm from Phoenix Elementary. And I just want to know, because our legislature is not very supportive of education, and you're talking about a budget, how are you going to change that idea that education is important, that we are able to fund education? Because we are like one of the lowest states in the United States in education, and we have great talent. And being from Washington State, it's very sad. So how are we going to be able to fund? You have a great vision, but how are we going to be able to fund it?
Sure. Well, first off, Nora, understand that I have been down there and I've worked on tough policy issues with Democrats and Republicans. And here's the general approach we're going to take. You mentioned the word education. You said education is important. I don't think there's anybody at the legislature who would disagree with that. Here's where the difficulty comes in. We're talking about public education being important. And there is something that I do think we need to remind our legislature and the state, that the path forward for Arizona is through quality public schools and supporting public education. The way you move the legislature is you don't go down there and take them head on in January. See, there is only one position statewide whose full-time job, elected position, is K-12 education, and that's the superintendent. And so in the interim, in the summer months when the legislature is away, you pull together a broad partnership of educators, business, parents, social organizations, and you go down to the legislature together with a focused agenda and work to change their minds that way. Because the legislature, when they're flanked, when they've been surrounded with folks who share a direction, they do turn and go the right direction. I've seen this with 1062 as an example. When the legislature realized that they had been surrounded and decided to make the right choice there, in my opinion. From my perspective, we need to go down there and do just that, but we also need to start a new discussion around the idea that our public schools make Arizona a better place, a better civic and economic place to be, because we need the public to see directly the outcomes of your great work and how they're making Arizona a better place. That's going to be an important part of the public narrative to changing the hearts and minds out there in a way where folks are ready to invest in public schools.
Let's go ahead and ask our second poll question. We are not done taking questions. Remember to push 0 if you're on and you want to ask a question. Donna, you've got a question about special ed, and we're going to talk to you in just a second. But here's what we'd like to ask. There is a day of action coming up on October 11th. There's even a question about how your campaign is going to be effective and prevail and have you as Arizona's next superintendent of public instruction. A big part of that is October 11th. AEA delegates at last year's annual convention felt so strongly about supporting our recommended candidates. They created a day of action, that's this October 11th, where our members are asked to do something to impact the outcome of the election. The fact is, David won't win this race alone. He will win, but he will win because enough people decide they're going to do what it takes. So we'd like to direct all of you to the following website, www.vote4schools.az.com. www.vote4schools.az.com and take part in AEA's Day of Action. You can find out what's happening in your area, which races you can be involved in, and we certainly hope that David's is one of those, and find out what you can do to get the outcomes that you need and that our students need. We've got Donna up next, who wants to point out that we can't teach all students the same, and we'll get to her in just a second. I do want to ask this second poll question. So regarding that October 11th Day of Action, please indicate by pressing keys if you'll commit to volunteering on our Day of Action or organizing an event in your neighborhood with the following choices. Press 1 if you will volunteer. Press 2 if you'll actually help organize an event, and that can be any size event in your neighborhood. And press 3 if you'll talk to your friends, family, and coworkers about our Day of Action. So that's 1 if you'll volunteer, 2 if you'll organize an event, and 3 if you'll talk to your friends, family, and coworkers about our Day of Action. In the meantime, let's get to Donna, who points out that we cannot educate all students or measure them the same way. We've got special needs students out there. Donna?
Yes, thank you so much. My frustrations, for the most part, I teach the SLD students, but I'm still hearing it from administrators that if my students have average IQ, there is absolutely no reason on earth why they can't achieve and why they can't pass all our state tests. That really frustrates me, and it's like the pendulum has swung in the wrong direction. We used to be where we were able to teach what was right for our students, what was appropriate for our students, and we're going away from that. David, what do you see as the future? I know that there's some really good things with our standards, but it has to be appropriate also to what we're going to be teaching our students.
David? Thank you very much for that call. David's going to answer that right now.
Thank you, Donna. One of the backgrounds and one of the areas I have studied is it's called psychometrics, the science of creating.
Now I'm going to give you 5 seconds on that.
I know. It is, but here's the situation. What that means is I know what tests can do, and here's the important part. I know what they can't do. What states get into trouble with regard to policies, when they really don't get into trouble for testing. They get into issues, in my opinion, with regard to policies that do not work in the best interest of students when they use tests for the purposes in which they were not intended. And I understand that personally as somebody, again, who has studied this. Let me tell you a guiding principle that I have. And it's going to be the guiding principle that your leadership team can use when they get down to the legislature with me together. And it's this. I will not allow a test to take the decision away out of an educator's hands. I think that is important because what we do right now with high-stakes tests is we put so much onto the decision of that test that we do not have an educator confirming the test, and we take the decision away from educators who know it best. I'll talk to you as a parent for a second. When I'm sitting across from my daughter's teachers, they better know a lot more about Lola and Olivia than the test score, and all the good ones do. And as a result, I don't understand how we would take decisions away from them. So as a guiding principle, I will be against policies that take decisions away from educators. A good example is I've got tremendous issues with the Move On When Reading law, largely because the decision is not in the hands of an educator, it's in the hands of a test. And so as a result, I think tests can trigger. I think tests can trigger interventions. I think they can trigger an alarm. But the decisions need to ultimately be made or checked by an educator.
So I'm hearing 2 things. Use assessments for a tool and only a tool for the right purpose, and get decisions like this back in the hands of teachers.
We've got to get decisions back in the hands of teachers. When a law comes my way and it takes decisions, we allow a test to get out of the hands of educators, I'm going to stand against it because it's the misuse of assessments, and more particularly, it does not involve the person, the people who understand our students best.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks for that question. Another question that comes up a great deal is about evaluation. David, our teachers are just feeling almost like the system is stacked against them in some ways. We've got Deborah from Levine that wants to know about a particular instrument being used. But we've also got Ruby calling in saying, how are we going to design fair evaluation systems? Just because we've had her in the queue for a while, let's talk to Deborah in Levine. And Deborah, I know you've got a technical issue with one evaluation method. If you can keep the question pretty well contained, we can hear where David is on the issue.
Well, I just wanted to know what his opinion is about the LOI that's being used by a company called Makisa to evaluate teacher effectiveness.
How are we going to evaluate our teachers, David? What really matters when we're trying to assess the job they're doing?
Well, yeah, that's a major issue, and one, Andrew, that I look forward to working with you and your members on. You've got the biggest stake in this, and I look forward to having you at the table as an important partner in this conversation. Let me tell you where I'm at generally. There's still some work to do on this. I'm not done, by the way, and I can't be done with this without sitting down with the folks who know it best. But there's a couple things that I find of concern. Number one, we do need to find a way for the evaluation system to reflect more than just assessment scores meaningfully. And I know that if they're in there in some cases, the question is whether or not additional measures, multiple measures are in there meaningfully. Second, right now the evaluation system is set up under the assumption that teachers are the only ones that impact students day to day. I think that group evaluations, team evaluations are more consistent with how students learn, and the group team efforts that are put into educating students, I would be in favor of expanding those as well to include more than just single teacher, single year. I think that's a bit of a simplistic approach. But the key here is we do need to continue to focus on outcomes. And that is one thing that will be important working with the legislature, will be important working with stakeholders, is that regardless of the changes that we make, we still need to stay focused on outcomes and making those the central thrust of any evaluation system.
Thanks for that call. I want to remind you to hit 0 if you've got a question. I also want to go over the results of our second polling question. We asked what you'd be willing to do: volunteer, organize an event, or at least talk to your friends, family, and coworkers. The results are encouraging. 22% say they are ready to volunteer. Please go to that website, www.vote4schoolsaz.com. That's the number 4. And at the same time, we've got a lot of friends. 69% of those still on the call are saying, I'll talk to my friends, family, and coworkers about the importance of that day of action.
And let me tell you how important that last one is, Andrew.
Please do.
And those of you that did not answer, I'm hoping you can do that. Talk to others. We have good information in the campaign. We've been around the state long enough to know this. When people learn about me, my stance, my story, we win them over in big, big numbers. Awareness is our biggest opponent, folks. The question is, can we get enough folks to touch the campaign, to learn about me between now and November 4th to win? All of you that have agreed to talk to your friends and coworkers, great. For those of you who are listening, I hope you do that at a minimum, because once we get them to our website, once they learn a little bit about me, I will tell you, we win them over in big, big numbers, and it's going to be an important path to victory for us.
And that's what Wes wanted to ask. And Wes, I don't know if that addresses your question about the campaign. Are you on? I don't know if we've still got Wes, but there are a couple of questions about charter schools. Where do they fit into your vision of education? There's a lot of disparity in the funding. Folks are very sensitive to that. We want to talk a little bit about charter schools after we talk to Anthony, who'd like to talk a little bit about the difference between charter and traditional district funding. Anthony, are you there?
I certainly am.
Go ahead, please. You're with David.
Hi, David. I appreciate your time this evening and speaking with us. Just real quick, my wife is an educator, and we've run through the AEA updates many, many times, that charter schools are funded at a level that really isn't even with public schools. They typically benefit greater because they don't have to pay for busing and they don't pay for free lunches. And then on top of that, they can be very discerning about the particular students they take in, and it gives them an unfair advantage. And this is a for-profit business. People are opening charter schools as a business to generate a profit for themselves, and I find it very disconcerting that my tax dollars are used to fund a for-profit business in a public school environment. I really find that distasteful. Can you address that, please?
Sure. Anthony, first off, charter schools are public schools, and not all charter schools are for-profit. There are many that are not. Let me tell you what I think is really the crux of the issue. We have, at the state level, 2 school funding systems, one for traditional public schools and one for charter schools. As Andrew knows well, it pits the 2 sectors against each other every legislative session. And in my opinion, the only winners are the legislators who, I think, promote this dual system because of the chaos and contentions that it creates at the legislative level. So one of my platform issues is to go forward and take our school finance system and start over and simplify. And I'm going to tell you in broad strokes what that looks like to me. It means for our traditional public schools, less regulations. There are a number of flexibilities that charter schools have. The truth is, I think traditional public schools could benefit from. But likewise, we need more transparency on behalf of our charter schools. They're just simply some basic questions about the use of public funds where the information is either not available or not readily available that we need to get some answers to. And the goal should be one system for all schools we call public, so that we can get past these disparity accusations, get past some of this finger pointing. And in my opinion, what I see a lot of times actually is both sectors, charter and traditional public schools, are angry with the state because it isn't working for them. I think it presents an opportunity for us to make this change so that we've got one system for all schools we call public.
Thanks so much for the call. Again, folks, so many of you have indicated you're willing to volunteer. Please see the website, www.vote4schoolsaz.com, to find out what you can do to get folks like David in office for the schools we need, the schools that our students deserve. Laurel wants to talk about some other indicators of success, not just college readiness, but some other things that mean a lot when you're an educator, the kind of students we're preparing. Laurel, are you on the call?
Yes, I am.
Go right ahead, please. You're with David.
Thank you. Good evening, David. I've got a question about, we talk a lot about college readiness for kids and career readiness, and that's basically making them ready to go out and take something from the world. But I don't hear any talk about citizenship readiness, about what we are preparing these kids to give back to society, to learn to function as a responsible citizen in the 21st century. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
That's a big question.
It is a big question. Laurel, I sat with a high school class a couple of weeks ago now, and I asked them, what do you think is the original purpose of public schools in the United States? And we had three choices, and we talked about each: democratic, social, or economic. And most of the students chose economic. Very few chose democratic. And what has happened along the way here, Laurel, is we have gotten away from the original purpose of public schools, which is really a democratic purpose. I think that's the reason why all of you are on here tonight, is to participate in the democratic process, and are now to the point where we, again, look at many of our schools, and many of the students see them as economic tools. My primary concern there is I think it shortchanges the real aspirations and inspirations of education. It is not the reason day to day that I think a lot of students would read a book or get involved in education. And my hope is that the kind of outcomes that I'm talking about, getting away from just testing to other outcomes, is going to allow the opportunity for us to broaden what it means to be a good school, what it means to get a quality education in Arizona. So we are not as narrow and are focusing on outcomes that are more relevant to students day to day. My biggest challenge when I was growing up, and I mentioned, I don't know if you were there for the beginning of this, but I wasn't a great high school student, largely because if it wasn't relevant, I didn't pay much attention to it. And I think that if we can go back to relevance, and for many students, participating in society, getting involved in the world around them is relevant, and we should continue to encourage that.
Thank you so much for the call. Remember to hit 0 if you've got a question. You'll go right into the queue and talk to one of our screeners. So make sure you hit 0 if you've got a question for David. David, there are a number of questions coming about, in general, how we're going to retain the teachers we have. There's so much focus on bringing the right people in, but we've got thousands of fantastic teachers. We've got Craig, for example, that wants to know where you stand on, the importance of like performance-based pay. We've got Sandra, who's a retired educator and wants to talk about, pensions. What role do those play? But Jan, kind of out of Peoria, has sort of the general umbrella question, which is, how are we going to attract and then retain the teachers we want in our classrooms? Jan, are you on?
Hi, Dr. Garcia.
Hi.
Hi. My question is, we have so many teachers that have recently retired, so we have a smaller pool of qualified educators now than we did in the last few years. How are we going to attract and retain good teachers? And I'm not just talking about salaries, although that's a really big issue. But in my district, a lot of it has to do with the inability of teachers to lead and make decisions on a district level that affect their own profession. To me, that's another big a factor in attracting and retaining quality teachers. Do you have any other ideas of how you can do that when you become superintendent?
Thanks, Jan. So, David,
I do, Jan.
What's the plan?
First off, I'd like everyone to just take a second and see one thing about the campaign here, and that is, if you talk to the politicos, the people that win office, they'll tell you, you know what the blueprint is. You beat up on teachers, you beat up on schools, you create a crisis, and you set yourself up as the person who can step in. Take a good look at our campaign. We're not doing that. And we're not doing that for a couple reasons. Number one, it isn't true. And second, it isn't fair to our good educators. It puts you back on your heels. And it creates a working relationship, in my opinion, going forward that isn't going to get real things done for the state. And so as a starting point, you're going to hear from somebody who has tremendous respect for those who have taught me, who continue to teach my daughters day to day. I don't take it lightly that I leave my daughters with their teachers for most of the day, and the responsibility that I leave with them. And I think that you're going to hear from me somebody who appreciates that. Now, on policy matters, we do need to treat our teachers as professionals. You're going to hear me say this over and over and over again. Treat them as professionals, which means, number one, we do need to get serious about paying them commensurate to what they contribute to Arizona from a civic perspective, from an economic perspective. And second, we need to let our teachers teach. I had the real tremendous opportunity, for those of you who know what's going on in the country of Finland. I spent 9 days there and did a talk at the University of Helsinki to see what was going on in Finland. And, the formula was pretty straightforward. They attracted their best and brightest and then paid them well and let them teach. And as a result, they're a country that has made tremendous gains, and where teaching is valued and respected literally in every corner. I've never been to a place where so much importance and respect was paid to the endeavor of education, but more importantly, the role of teachers in society.
Let's talk to Craig on this same general area, David. Craig's in Mesa, and he kind of wants to fit performance-based pay into this discussion. Craig, are you still on?
Hello, Dr. Garcia. Quick question. Are you for or against performance-based pay? Because my experience is when you see people vying for the same pot of money, they're less likely to work together as a team. And in an elementary setting, you need a team of teachers to make students successful.
David, it's a big question. Our members, frankly, are divided somewhat. They've seen this done poorly and get exactly the kinds of effects that Craig is talking about. They also don't want to eliminate the possibility because I think they hold out hope that it could be done well. What do you think?
Well, Craig, here's where I stand on performance pay. Again, the devil's going to be in the details here. It can be done well. It hasn't necessarily been promoted that way in Arizona, in my opinion. But there's a couple things that I think, one thing that I think is problematic and one that I believe should be part of the performance pay system. Number one, the performance pay systems I have seen come out of the state, my primary issue with them is they are exclusively based on test scores. And I think that is not the direction to go if you do want to encourage teachers from a performance pay perspective. We've got to do multiple measures that include outcomes other than test scores, in addition to test scores. And the second part is performance pay also needs to get away from this single teacher approach and recognize that education is done through teams of teachers, done through groups of teachers, and I'd like to see, and we can create, by the way, performance pay plans that incorporate more than one teacher, because that's the reality of what happens in schools. It is no single teacher that can take the credit, and I know what you're talking about here. You're vying over the same pot. It assumes you can take that credit, and the reality is it's teams of teachers that educate students, and I think performance pay plans at a minimum should incorporate groups or team evaluations.
Thanks so much for the question, Craig. Now, we're going to switch gears just a little bit and go to a group of folks without whom a district cannot run, a school cannot open. In fact, students can't really even get to the campus. All these roles that fold under the title of education support professional. Sure. AEA members felt so strong about that connection that they introduced a new core value a couple of years ago, that education support professionals are valued partners in education. How can you use the superintendent of public instruction role to bring attention to that community that really educates students? To talk about that is Layman from Phoenix. Layman, you on?
Yes. Hi, Dr. David. This is Lamont Collins with the Phoenix Union High School District, and I just had a quick question of just what you asked, Andrew. How is he going to incorporate the education support professionals in that?
Yeah, Lamont, thank you very much. Let me tell you what I can do right away. Understand this issue and make sure I'm out in public talking about it correctly. That is one of the things I can do. I know that successful schools go beyond just teachers in the classroom, and I understand the tremendous assistance and importance of education support professionals in schools. So to start off with, I'm not going to have to get up to speed on this one. I'm going to be able to get out there right away and talk about the importance of it. Second, this is one, truth be told, I will turn to my partners to better understand how I can incorporate these issues into meaningful policy. And I look forward, and I will tell you, so you understand, AEA has made this absolutely clear to me when I sit down with them, that when Andrew says that they do value their education support professionals, I hear it every time I sit with them. And as a result, I look forward to sitting down with our education support professionals, understanding these issues better, and then coming up with a concrete plan on how they can be meaningfully incorporated into public policy. Lamont, I'm not in this thing to tinker. I'm in this thing to get out there and have an impact in education, and I'm hoping that that this could be part of it needs to be part of that impact.
And I am going to give a shout out to Lamont. I should have been all over that name. Lamont, you and I have history, so you can tease me about that next time you're in the office. But thank you very much for the question. Got another question, David, about the role of librarians, media specialists. These are positions that have been in danger because of cuts. If Marie from Tucson is still on the call, we'd love to hear from you.
Hello, Dr. Garcia.
Hi, Marie.
I am a retired librarian. I worked for 24 years as a librarian in TUSD, and right now I'm so concerned about the library use, especially in our elementary schools where the librarians have been removed and the book budgets have disappeared. What will you do about restoring the funding that we can have our libraries back in our schools? Thank you.
Thanks for the call.
Marie, let me tell you, you have one of the best lobbyists and influential people I know on your side, and that is my daughter Lola, who loves her library and has honestly told me that, Papa, when you win, can you make sure there are more books in our library? That is one of her issues, and so is physical activity, by the way. She wants to get out and move a little bit. She's 7. And so I know that information is changing. As a professor, this is what I do. I write, and I know information is changing. I know our libraries need to evolve with that change. But personally, I'm a person that values books, in a family that values books. And I think that the heart with regard to exploration, with the ability to pursue your interest, it comes from on a campus. It comes from a library or media center where students can go pursue those interests. So it is something that's important to me, important to my family, and hope that we continue to have opportunities for our students to go and lose themselves wonderfully in books like I had the chance to do, and by the way, still love to do. Look forward to doing that after the election, by the way, sitting and reading a good book.
Yeah, like you're going to have time for that. We're not going to let you have time for that. But thank you very much, Marie, for that question. And David, thanks for the thoughtful response. We're going to go now to Jackie in Surprise, one of the other areas that has been hit. Fine arts education. We've got questions about gifted education. Are we ignoring our best and brightest? But let's go to Jackie about the fine arts education. Jackie, you on?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Hello, Dr. Garcia. I'm just interested in what your views are on fine arts education. We seem to find out that our funding is cut almost first every time, and so I just wanted to hear a little bit more about what your plans are. Thank you.
Jackie, this is a question that I get a lot, and truth is, it depresses me. It depresses me a little. It depresses me a lot, actually. And part of the reason is because as a parent, as an educator, I couldn't imagine my daughter's education without fine arts. I couldn't imagine my daughter's education without literature. I couldn't imagine my daughter's education without the ability to be active and to express that side of themselves. And so as we go forward here, one of the things you will have is somebody that's going to get up and say, an education has to include fine arts. It has to include literature. It has to include things like the humanities, because that's the reason you get educated, in my opinion. You get educated so that you can engage and read great literature and enjoy fine arts and enjoy music, which is something that that is an important part of my daughter's education. And so to begin with, you're going to get a public advocate using the bully pulpit to address these issues. Now, as part of these issues, as part of changing our focus away from just standardized test scores, my hope is that it allows the opportunity for all subject areas, more subject areas, to be meaningfully included in the academic core of schools. And the reason I'm pushing this so much to get away from just standardized test scores and include other measures is because what I'm hoping, what I believe it's going to do, is make our schools better places to teach and learn. And as an educator, that matters a lot to me.
Matters a lot to the folks listening, for sure. And we still have hundreds of people on this call. And I want to remind those still on the call that a good many of you, 3/4 of you almost, said you're willing to talk to your friends, family, and coworkers about the Day of Action. Remember what the Day of Action is on October 11th. That's the chance to focus on one day to get momentum going for these priority races and get the people in office, people like David Garcia for Superintendent of Public Instruction, the folks that you need in there as your partner and that our students deserve. So go to the website, www.vote4schoolsaz.com. Let's take a question about class size. I can't believe it's taken this long for someone to ask about it, but Alana in Chandler is going to present that question to you, David. Alana, are you on?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening, Dr. Garcia. My question is in regard to class size. There are some states that have a cap as far as how many students are allowed to be in an elementary classroom. I taught in Texas, and that cap was 22 or 23. They had to write to get a waiver to get 23 students in. And it's much easier to meet the needs of our students when we have 22 or 23 versus 29 or 30. So I was just wondering if there's something like that in the future for us to make sure that we have small class sizes in all of our elementary schools, or what your views were on that.
Alana, that is a great question, and I just wish that every policymaker could go into two different classrooms, go into a classroom that's busting at the seams with 30 plus 40 students, go into a classroom with 20, 25 students, and see for themselves the difference and what can be done with smaller class sizes. Alana, let me be honest with you and tell you the challenge here. When smaller class sizes are available, it is almost exclusively because people at the local level have funded their local schools to reduce class sizes. Overrides, one of the most popular programs for overrides is to lower class sizes. By the way, early education is also very popular, as well as gifted programs, very, very popular. And with local overrides. If the state's going to get serious about this, we need to find a way to take that local energy and bring it to the state level. Because when local folks pass it, it's wonderful for their local communities, but we got to find a way for that voice and that energy to be at the state level as well, so that this becomes an issue for all school districts and not just those that are able to pass these local overrides get the benefits of smaller class sizes, early education, and gifted. It is something that, just as a finance mechanism, as I mentioned, starting over and simplifying, this relationship between what's going on at the local level and making that the state agenda is something that I think is should be an important direction to go, so that all communities have a stake in this and are pushing for many of those same outcomes that only some of our communities have right now.
Very good. Thank you for the call. David, we've talked already about Move On When Reading. There may be folks that weren't on right at the beginning, but can you give a 10-second response just about your position on Move On When Reading?
Sure. When a student cannot read at the end of third grade, we have to sound an alarm. But retaining a student is probably the last thing on my list to do. Why? Because being retained is just as detrimental to your student's likelihood of graduating as not reading in the first place in third grade. So let me tell you what I'd like to do. We need to start early intervention and detection in areas where it's not available right now, kindergarten, first grade, to see if students are having learning difficulties before they get to third grade. Second, if at the end of third grade a student cannot pass the assessment, we need an educator to confirm the assessment to make sure that we are not holding a student back or intervening with the student by mistake. Third, the goal should be to get students reading back on track on grade level and then get them to return with their age cohort. Because doing the same thing over again in third grade, in my opinion, is a definition of madness. We do need to get students reading, take advantage of a targeted intervention, and then push those students to get back on track with their age cohort.
Thanks very much, and thanks everybody. Remember to hit 0 if you want to ask David a question. We're going to talk to Ava in Vail, who just wants to hit again not just the use of assessment, but the frenzy. NEA currently has a national campaign to end toxic testing. Kirsten Sinema has a bill in Congress on educators' behalf to diminish the amount of standardized testing. Ava, are you able to talk to David?
Yes, good evening, Dr. Garza. Rather than say, what are you going to do, I just want to give you a perspective of what's happening in my life as a teacher. Every 2 weeks, I have to give a standardized test. Another 2 weeks pass, another standardized test. Whoever doesn't pass has to go on the reteach, and then at the 7 weeks, we have the big benchmarks, and then whoever doesn't pass, they have to go on the reteach on top of the teaching of the objectives that have to be done for the following quarter. That's how I live my life, and that's how all Vail teachers live, English teachers and math teachers and science teachers live their life. We have a high turnover, burnout, and sometimes we cannot engage students because it's all about testing. Now, if it was only one district, that's fine, but with beyond textbooks, which the district is selling, that's how other teachers are probably going to live their life. And I'm a little concerned. I have a 9th grader and a 12th grader, and I don't believe that's how I want them to learn. So
Eva, let's start off with this. Remember that the state only requires one assessment. So the frenzy that you're talking about are local district decisions, and the reason that I think you see the frenzy out there is because 96% of the letter grades that schools receive, 96%, is based off the test score. That is a tremendous incentive to focus on only one thing, testing. A plan and the direction we will go is we will still have standards and we're still going to have assessments. They're just not going to account for 96% of how we evaluate schools and teachers. And what we're going to do is, in its place, put additional measures that matter to students, like getting a career and technical education certificate at the high school level, language proficiency, and others that are going to encourage and incentivize our schools to focus on other outcomes and allow our teachers the opportunity to teach. The frenzy you're talking about is because there's so much stakes around just testing. And if we change that, then there'll be less incentive to test in the way that you're focusing on. And what matters to me is we're going to let our teachers teach, and we're going to make our schools better places to teach and learn.
Very good, and thank you for that. David, Catherine from Phoenix wants to talk to you about what you've seen in other states, what you're noticing. You've been a scholar on public education for a long time, and you've got just an expansive amount of knowledge and research behind you. What do you see that you like? Catherine, are you on?
I am. Hi, how are you?
Very good. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your patience.
Well, thanks for your call. So I heard you talking about Finland earlier, and I was very impressed because a lot of schools I don't hear talking about looking at other teaching modes and does it work, could it work here? So I was wondering, you know, Arizona is one of many states, and have you looked at any other states or countries and seen models that you would like to bring to Arizona?
Good question, Catherine. Yes, I have. And you should know that a lot of times Arizona does look to other states, and we incorporate the things we see, but we kind of do it on the cheap here in Arizona. We take a light version of it, which is not effective in terms of implementing it well. There are some states that are doing great things. Tennessee offering 2 years of post-secondary education after high school as part of their public school system. I just think is a tremendous idea, and one that's going to, I think, help that state. I think that the state of Washington has always been a leader in getting students ready in terms of career and guidance. I think they've always done some very, very good work. North Carolina is a good state in terms of data and data use. A lot of what we know comes out of North Carolina because they've been very successful there. The state of Massachusetts. It's a leader often. We often look at the state of Massachusetts, but I'll tell you what Massachusetts has always done well. They are at the forefront of every idea. Wherever we're at in policy today, Massachusetts was there a handful of years ago. And I love that spirit. I love the idea that Massachusetts is always, they are the state that a lot of times starts to swing the pendulum. That could be us if we had that same attitude in Arizona. So there's a few examples of some states that I think are doing some exciting things.
Thanks so much for that call. David, we've been talking for longer than you might imagine. We've still got a lot of folks on the call. We do want to wrap up, though, which we have to do, well into an hour. We've still got folks that want to talk to you. I think this shows how important your race is, your vision, and the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction to educators. And one of the areas, we've touched on it tonight, but we're going to go to Gwendolyn in Tucson, because there just are so many questions out there about the idea of evaluation. Educators have felt the brunt of that for a long time, and they're just sensitive to it. Gwendolyn, are you still on with us?
I am, but I really believe my question has been answered because I just was, you know, the other outcomes, and I think my question has already been answered, that it's other outcomes other than testing.
It certainly is, David.
It simply has to be. It has to be because, Gwendolyn, right now we're asking our educators to get students ready for multiple choice tests. And the reality is there are no multiple choices in life. And if we want to get students ready for life after high school, for an ever-changing world, we have got to include indicators other than multiple choice type assessments. So it's important to me because I think it is going to change our schools to better places to teach and learn. And more importantly, it's going to prepare our students for the world ahead.
Thank you, and thank you all for the calls. Believe it or not, we have been at this for over an hour tonight. That just means you've got a lot of things on your mind about the importance of the Superintendent of Public Instruction race. We have the chance to elect an educator. Educators have been calling for it forever. Even back in my 17 years as a high school English teacher, we knew the importance of having somebody that had been there. David is a native. He's an educator, and he's got a wealth of experience to bring to the race. We've got to get in there. We've got to elect David Garcia as the next Superintendent of Public Instruction, and we have to do whatever it takes. So I'm asking you to go to that website, www.vote4schools.az.com, www.voteforschoolsaz.com. You can put a friend, a colleague, and a believer in the Superintendent of Public Instruction office. And your interest in this call tonight, the fact that you stayed on and wanted to talk or just listen to David, tells you how important this race is. David, closing thoughts, 30 seconds, just to say good night and thank folks and leave them with a thought.
We'll leave them with a thought. Andrew, thank you very much for this opportunity. I look forward to this being the first of many opportunities to engage with you and your members on how to improve Arizona public education, so thank you. Also want to let everybody out there know, Andrew's right, we have a tremendous opportunity to win this time. It's amazing. We know, looking at some data out there, that this race we can get this done. It's going to take you letting your friends and family know and getting involved, but we are right there to make this happen. What I want everyone to understand here is once we get this done, what you're going to have in me is somebody who comes from public schools, who has a direct investment in public schools in my own family, and is going to continue to be an advocate for our public schools in Arizona.
I want to thank David Garcia, Arizona's next Superintendent of Public Instruction. Our job is to put him there. The AEA membership has a mission, and that's keeping the promise of quality public education and a vision to create a great public school for every student. That takes partnerships, and that takes leadership. And right now, the opportunity before us is to elect David Garcia as Arizona's next Superintendent of Public Instruction. Thank you for being on the call tonight. Thank you for everything you do for the students in Arizona. David, good luck. Go fight, win. We're going to be with you every step of the way. Folks, we tried to get to as many questions as we could, but thanks so much. Now let's go forward and work nonstop through November 4th. Thanks, everybody, and have a great evening.